Once upon a time, there was a beautiful girl in a small village in Nyanza. She had lost her mother when she was still young. Her father married another wife who mistreated the child by always giving her a lot of work. Her father was aware that his wife mistreated the child, but he could not do anything about it for fear of causing commotion within the house. When an opportunity comes, he thought, "I will offer my daughter to whoever comes along for her hand in marriage, so that I may have peace with my wife." One day, a man came to ask for the daughter's hand in marriage, and the father quickly agreed. The formal custom procedures were observed, and within a very short time, a colourful wedding ceremony took place. After the wedding, when all the guests had gone home and the new wife was sleeping, a voice came from above and said, "Girl, this man is not your husband. Yours is yet to come. Wake up and go back to your parents now." She quickly awoke and went back to her parents. She told her father everything she had heard. He accepted her and asked her to feel free and have patience. 2 months later, another man came to ask for her hand in marriage, and the same process was repeated. After the wedding, when all the guests had gone home, she received the same instructions from the same voice, and she went back to her parents. One more marriage took place thereafter, but the same thing happened. News of her failed marriages spread quickly in the region. This embarrassed her father. In those days, every adult male was obliged to render some services at the king's palace. The girl's third marriage coincided with her father's turn to report at the king's palace. Her father was therefore scheduled to leave the next day. Before the father left, he asked his daughter to leave the homestead and start fending for herself. He told her that he was so embarrassed by her failed marriages that he did not wish to see her anymore. The father asked one of his servants to take her to a forest, very far away, and abandon her there. He made sure his daughter left the homestead before he started his own journey to the king's palace. Her trek was very long and tiresome. They reached the forest at sunset. They entered it, and when they reached the middle, the servant abandoned the girl and went back to the village. She was so exhausted that she could not walk any more. She sat under one of the huge trees and fell fast asleep. She started wandering in the forest the following morning, and before midday, she noticed something that looked like a house. She cautiously walked towards it and found that it was indeed a nice house that had been deserted. In the compound, there were 2 granaries full of beans and sorghum. She entered the house and swept it. She went picking wild fruits and came back to the house, where she hid herself in one of the rooms. She slowly started feeling free. On the second day, she lit a fire, prepared herself a hearty meal, and lay on the bed. She started wondering about the person who built the house. Why did he choose to build it in this forest? From where did he harvest these beans and sorghum? Why did he abandon his harvest? The most probable answer, to her own thinking, was that the house had been built by a thief who one day was eaten by a wild animal. Did the animal find him lying on this bed? That thought made her jump out of the bed. She chose to sit outside and watch the animal coming instead of being eaten from that bed. It was a cold afternoon, as it had rained continuously for several days. There was a flat stone in the compound that served as a bench. Though it was still wet, she decided to sit on it and continued imagining things. Some cracks nearby attracted her attention and made her gaze in the direction of the noise, almost breathless. She noticed something moving. A closer observation revealed that it was a tired and equally scared old man who looked like he had not eaten for days. He cautiously stared at the frightened girl from a distance of about 20 steps and said, "Greetings. My name is Mungeri. I am on a long journey to the king's palace, and I need accommodation for tonight. Would you let me stay here?" The girl welcomed him and told him that she was feeling lonely and very happy to find someone she could talk to. She lit a big fire that made her visitor feel warm. She prepared food and something to drink. They ate, drank, and chatted. During their conversation, she told him how she ended up being in the house. On his part, the man told her that he had not eaten anything for 4 days besides being rained on day and night. They both felt comfortable with each other and found that they actually shared the same problems, a fact that naturally created an urge for them to stay together. She found no need to prepare a separate bed for her visitor. They had become one. They continued talking until they finally fell asleep. At the first cockcrow, she heard the same voice again, but this time it said, "You have finally found a husband and a home. You must not break any marriage vow, and you must always obey the king." She immediately woke up and thought about all the handsome young men who had paid a lot of dowry to her father, including the cattle and beautiful fields her former spouses owned. Then she wondered how she would spend her entire life in the middle of that forest, with an old man as her husband. While she was still asking herself all those questions, the forest cleared and became a very beautiful pasture with many herds of healthy cattle. Her house became a palace, with busy servants running around. Mungeri was awoken by the servants' activities. He was confused. He thought he was dreaming when the young woman told him, "What you are seeing is real and has come from God. However, God has commanded us to remain faithful to one another and to obey the king." Mungeri agreed as he continued marveling at God's kindness. He finally said, "I came here yesterday seeking accommodation in a dangerous forest. Now I am surrounded by servants, all this wealth, and above all, you as my wife. We must surely obey God at all cost," he concluded. He felt the happiest man in the world. Soon it was his turn to serve at the king's palace. Months and years passed. Mungeri's services had become indispensable. His wife kept waiting but soon grew impatient and disobeyed God by replacing her husband with her servants. This situation continued for as long as Mungeri remained at the king's palace, where he had become one of the king's top advisors. One morning she could not believe herself when she woke up and found herself in a pool of water full of noisy frogs and other aquatic creatures. The beautiful pasture had become a large swamp. News of the incident reached Mungeri. He asked for leave and found his wife roaming about near the swamp, not knowing what to do. Mungeri knew that she had disobeyed God's instructions. Without asking her what had happened, he apologized for having stayed for so long without visiting her. On her part, she truthfully told her husband everything she did during his absence. They forgave each other, and immediately, God gave them another pasture, filled it with cattle, and gave them new servants. When the king heard about it, he was very sorry and decided never to hold his subjects at the palace for too long.